So it is my pleasure to introduce our next moderator, Yumi Grigsby, who recently stepped into the executive director role at Share Our Spare, a nonprofit based in Chicago. Share Our Spare is a community resource of essentials, education, and advocacy for families and the agencies that serve them. Prior to that, Yumi was the Deputy Chief of Policy for the Cook County State's Attorney's Office and the former Chief of Policy for the City of Chicago. And she is also an author in her own right and wrote the book titled Empowered Health, about a shockingly dismissive healthcare system. So Yumi, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I was just saying that I wore heels for the panel, but you can't see them because they're hidden. I am going to set the tone and then invite up our panelists because they are going to introduce themselves once we start. So first, I just want to say today's panel is about what it means to elevate your voice, not just your own, but the voices of communities that have too often been left out of rooms, where stories get told, where resources get distributed, and futures get decided. So the writers that are coming on the stage are doing exactly that, and each one is doing it differently. And so I'm really excited to bring on Dimple Abichandani, class of 2002. Rebecca Arnold, class of 2004. Chanda Oak Wolf, class of 2010. And finally, Rishi Reddi, class of 1992. Here are the shoes, everybody. You will not see them again. That's the rest of the day. Okay. So I would love for you to share your name, what you do, and give us your book in one sentence. But I'm being very flexible and relaxed, so if it's more than one sentence to say all of what you do, go ahead. And I will start with Rishi.
Okay, I'm Rishi Reddi. I'm Rishi Reddi. I'm an environmental lawyer. I work for Ceres, which is a sustainability nonprofit. I am a mother of 2 kids, and I write fiction on the side and essays as well, and a couple of other things.
And tell us about the book.
The book that I'll talk to you about today is about it. It's a historical novel set in the 1910s about a young man named Ram who comes from Punjab in India, leaves behind a wife who is pregnant that he does not know that, and comes to Southern California and falls in love out of extreme loneliness over many years with a Mexican woman who fought in the Mexican Revolution. It's based on a true story. There's a murder. There's a couple of love triangles.
My name is Chanda Oak Wolf. I'm the author of A Dozen Delicious Donuts, a sweet Cambodian-American story. This story is about an immigrant family and their journey to America, and how do we preserve our culture through the many traditions, and food is explicitly in this book. And the main focus is love, family, and resilience. And this is not my full-time job. I should say that. I am a mom of 2. I am in higher ed administration. And I am, I would say, a community activist. And I think that's really kind of, I think, being here today, what I'm realizing is being part of a community that really sees us in a different light. We are more than women. We are more than workers. We are more than a lot of things that people see. And, you know, I think being up here is just an incredible moment to share all of the different things that we are.
so beautiful. I'm Dimple Abichandani, and I'm the author of A New Era of Philanthropy, 10 Practices to Transform Wealth into a More Just and Sustainable Future. I've worked in the philanthropic sector for about 2 decades, leading foundations, leading donor collaboratives, and more recently, I've transitioned to advising donors and advising foundations with the purpose of unlocking more resources and unlocking more solidarity to build a more just and sustainable future. And I'm so happy to be here.
I'm Rebecca Arnold. I'm an executive leadership coach, and I'm delighted to be with these ladies. We had an awesome panel prep session that I wish could go on for days, so I'm looking forward to hearing all their insights. My book, The Rooted Renegade, Transform Within, Disrupt the Status Quo, and Unleash Your Legacy, is the Bible I wish I had when I graduated from law school, and an accompaniment through my life. It's a lot of tools and practices to support high-achieving folks with everything from what's my purpose now, who do I want to be, how do I settle my nervous system in a world that is collapsing around me, how do I do the kind of transformative work we've been talking about today and still feel solid footing in myself. And so I am proud to do a lot of work with my clients who are high-achieving folks in law, medicine, academia. And so this is for them and for any of you. And so I'm delighted to talk about it more today.
I'm going to stand only because I'm going to walk across and make sure I give you your microphones. And I'm going to ask Dimple to also show off her book while we're speaking. I'm starting with Rebecca and just wanted you to go into this idea of being grounded and disruptive at the same time. I know that that's a part of the book that you wrote, so I wanted to clarify that for everyone here today.
Thank you. One of the things I found throughout my practice is I work with disruptors. Whether they're in academia, medicine, or law, they're folks who want to do things differently. And there's a kind of skill set, an internal skill set that is required to do that work that most of us don't just come with. My clients are often at an intersection or inflection point where they figure out that what got them to where they currently are can no longer serve them going forward, and they need a new set of tools and supports. So I think about you all and my clients as analogous to Olympic athletes. We think about the team they have supporting them. The kind of work you're doing requires a team, and it requires us to understand how to build ourselves up from the inside out. And so when I think about disruption, it requires both those allies on the outside and how do we create the mindsets, habits, and skills that support us to do the disruptive work. What I mean by that is when I'm activated, how do I settle my nervous system so that I can fully show up to the work? What I mean by that is in a moment where I'm feeling in tension with the values I know I hold and the workplace I'm stepping into or the kind of work I do, how do I show up in ways that feel aligned for me and hold that tension until I can make the shifts that I need to make? And so a lot of the practices in the book and a lot of the practices I use with my clients are around that staying rooted and grounded in who you are and what you want to create in the world as you are in the process of disruption.
Thank you. And I'm going to go over to Dimple as well. Your book is also about giving advice to nonprofits, to philanthropy, to a sector. And so just wanted to talk to you wanted you to talk a little bit about how you're bringing your voice into the story that you told.
Yeah, so should I say a little bit about what inspired me to write it? Is that so I had been leading a private foundation that was funding social justice work for about 7 years through COVID, through the first Trump administration. And I was transitioning out of that role in 2022, thinking that I'm going to take a break, catch my breath, and then just keep doing this, move into a role, moving even more resources. And as I was starting to look for new roles, I found that I kept having this question come up, which was, but do I believe that philanthropy can meet this moment, right? This moment of polycrisis. And I started to actually, when I would be speaking to rooms of funders, because I would often get asked to speak to funders, I started actually asking people to close their eyes and raise their hand if they believed that philanthropy could meet this moment. And what I found was a sector where we actually were all holding that question. And so to me, actually, do I believe wasn't a good question, but the generative question that inspired me to write the book was, what is a philanthropy for these times? You know, how do we take this old tool that comes to us from the Gilded Age and actually use it to not just keep preserving unjust systems and extractive systems by just covering them over, gilding them, but actually use them to transform these systems? So that was the question that inspired the book. And as I was writing it, I had, for the first time in my career, a lot of imposter syndrome. Like, I never had that as a lawyer. I didn't have it as an executive director. But as I was writing this book, I would hear this voice in my head all the time that was like, who are you to write about philanthropy? Who are you? Like, you're not Andrew Carnegie. You know, we don't come from wealth. And so it actually occurred to me that it was really important to, in the book, actually answer that and to place myself in this work. And so I talk about my family's history. I talk about something that I had almost never talked about in my career. I talk about my father's experience as a refugee and how that informed me as a funder. I talk about my mother as an immigrant and what she taught me about centering care and how there's always enough resources when we start with care. And what's been lovely is all the people who have said to me as I've read this book that those stories resonate with their own. I've had South Asian women say to me, oh, that's my family's story, and I've never read it anywhere. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And that really comes into what I'm about to ask Chanda, which is, you talk about being inspired by telling immigrant stories, and your own family was survived the Cambodian genocide. How do both of those influences come together to make a children's book?
Thank you, Yumi. So just a little bit of background. In 1975, the killing fields occurred. This happened for about 4 years, and a quarter of the population were essentially murdered. And the outcome of those who survived, because it was a systematic way of eliminating certain groups of people. It was the educated population. So both of my parents came to this country as refugees with very limited formal education. Throughout the time leading up to the war itself, there were constant instability. The Vietnam War was occurring, the fall of Saigon happened, and I think many people here remember those days where young people, higher ed institutions, young men being drafted. Those were all of concern then. It is a concern today. And so it is very much relevant to what is happening in our society. And just so you know, there was a law that was recently passed where young men between the ages of 18 and 25, they're automatically being enrolled to drafts. So just being aware and mindful of what is happening around the world and what's happening in the current political environment. But to go back to my story, is that they came here, and I think part of being an immigrant, it's just extremely hard to share your story when you are merely trying to survive. And I think about what's happening around immigration, ICE, and what is happening today, and the need for more storytelling around our stories as immigrants. And so this is a segue towards something that is helping to have, I think the word we used earlier was civil discourse. It is a non-threatening way to allow young people to begin to see other people in a way that's human, that's real, and that's different. And so I'm hopeful that all of this can come together in a way that's going to benefit the future.
And so with you, Rishi, your background is in environmental law, and you wrote this sweeping story that combines mystery and history and migration. And so do you want to talk a little bit about how you came to tell your story in that way?
Sure. Thank you very much. And I just want to say, Chanda, I can't agree with you more about what stories do in this space when so much about what the Trump administration is doing with the label of illegal, that the minute you tell a person's real story, you can no longer see them that way. Then fitting a person into a narrative which is common to all of us, you know, in terms of our birth, our loves, who we grieve when they die. Stories are so important in that way, and they do it in a way that doesn't threaten. I just wanted to underline that because I thought it was beautifully said. I also, so I thought of this story just down the street at 92 Cargill Hall when I was, I think, a second year, when we were listening to a lecture about the citizenship cases, the series of cases that the Supreme Court was deciding whether somebody was white enough to be considered a citizen of this country. And we read a little excerpt about a man named Bharat Singh Thind, who came to the United States in 1910 and was of Punjabi, South Asian descent. And I, you know, this was eons ago, okay? I'm 1992. So I had no idea that South Asians had come to this country that long ago. And I left that class that day thinking like I had to do more research on this. And what I looked at, there was not a lot in those days. In the 3 or 4 decades since, there's been many sociologists that have looked at that population and how they immigrated here and married Mexican women, many of them, a lot of them in the Imperial Valley, some in, the city of Yuma. There's a lot more information on it now that didn't exist then. My family came in 1971, shortly after the Immigration Act of '65 opened up American doors to South Asians in ways that they hadn't before. We were very arrogant and prideful about being the first ones. We were not the first ones. There was this whole population that existed that helped cultivate that area of the United States, set it up as a main agricultural center for the U.S. at that time, where the men who came over fought in World War I for the United States, and ultimately were divested of their lands and were not allowed to become citizens, which is why we were reading that case. So it was very important to me to tell the story. It was very important to research it well. I didn't want to research it for 13 years, but that's what I did. And because I wanted to get the story really right. I didn't want to go off on some tangent or fiction or include things in it to sort of enhance the story. It didn't need to be enhanced. It was very important to me to hew very closely to the truth.
Thank you so much. And now that we know what inspired you and how you wanted to tell the story and more about the stories that you told, once you knew you had a book, what actually was involved in bringing it to life day to day? Did you have rituals? Did you have accountability partners? Did you have to say no to anything in your life? And for those of you who are balancing day jobs and caregiving alongside writing, what did you have to say no to in order to say yes to this book?
So this book started during COVID with live videos I recorded on Facebook when we were all in lockdown. And I felt like a lot of the tools and strategies I was using with my clients were things that all of us needed. And I realized after doing it for a number of months that there was a lot of content in here that I wanted to offer. And so my process was a little bit different as a result of that. I started transcribing the videos I had recorded, and a structure then grew out of that. I am much more of an organic writer. People are pantsers or planners. They kind of write off by the seat of their pants, or they plan ahead. I'm definitely a pantser. And I also, and this is one of the strategies I talk to my clients about a lot, and this is the opposite of what you will hear from a lot of writers. I am not a you sit in your chair every day and you write X number of words kind of person. I need to write when I am feeling in the groove of what I'm hoping to generate. And so I really honored my own energy and patterns, which meant that I wrote in sprints instead of every day. And it will be interesting to hear how people's processes differed with that. I would go in deep holes and then I would emerge and not touch it for a while and then I would come back to it. So my hope is the lesson in that for all of you is really honoring what your own personal styles are related to whatever kind of work you do. We often try to force ourselves into structures and systems. And instead, what writing has taught me is really to honor what our process is because it's way more efficient than fighting against it.
So for me, I started with that question. I didn't start with, oh, this is going to be a book. I started with, this is something that I want to really understand before I move into another leadership role. And so I had a 2-year fellowship with the National Center for Family Philanthropy, which gave me a stipend. So that was really important. I didn't have to rush back into another full-time role. And initially I thought, oh, this might be like a series of opinion pieces. And then as I started kind of diving into it, it started to feel like, oh, this is bigger. And I remember, this is actually a true story, I remember having this thought of maybe this is a book? Could this be a book? I don't know how to write a book, and I remember thinking, I wish I knew what that takes. And literally the next day I logged on to LinkedIn and something came across my feed that said, do you think you might have a book in you? I was like, maybe. And then it was actually, I clicked on it and it was something called Storia Summit, which was a retreat but that was held by somebody who called herself a book doula. And she did this retreat in Spain where she spends a whole week telling you what it takes to write a book. And she was also a ghostwriter, and she had written books for 2 of my friends. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, I need to go to that. So I went there. And she started the retreat off saying, some of you are going to come here and you're going to go home realizing that you don't want to write a book and it's still worth your time because you could waste years. And I thought, oh, that's going to be me. And at the end of the week, she actually took me aside and said, this book is already in you. You really need to write it. Wow. And so the other thing I'll share is everything I had done in my career up until that point had involved lots of people and had been collaborative and had been in an organization. So my process was, I actually felt super lonely. That part of writing was really hard for me. And I solved that by finding writing communities. I had another philanthropy ED friend who was writing a book at the same time. We would get on Zoom together. I found something called the Unicorn Authors Club, which was writers of color. And we would meet on Zoom 3 times a week and write together. So that's how I finished my book, was actually writing in community.
Thank you.
A little bit different for me. So maybe some of you here have seen Cambodian-American children's book. I don't know. I didn't see many. And there's a little bit of a flaw in the system under Asian American, and May is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander month, just so folks are aware. We celebrated in the month of May, and I sense that under this umbrella, there are also missing Asian Americans in this monolith. And throughout my life, I had never fully understood or found an identity simply by saying that I'm Asian American. And as I've gotten older, I realize there actually aren't many books about our experience, who we are, what we represented. And my goal was really after being in this country for about 50 years, since 1975, when the first wave of the Southeast Asian population came, there still weren't books that captured our experience. And so I thought the best way to get folks reading is to get someone from the earliest stage of reading and to navigate this environment in a way that would not only benefit children but families, because ultimately the parents buy the books for the children. And this would open the doors towards more discussion around what other people look like, what is, different between the two, but also I think a dialogue that doesn't really exist in households. And I was trying to be really mindful about how to have these types of discussions around war without really talking about war directly. But these are all things that young people go through, but oftentimes we shelter our children in so many ways that we are looking to protect them, but in some ways are doing them a disservice. And so I'm really hoping that using a children's book as a method to have more civic discourse about our differences, that it's okay to hear the word no and be okay to disagree with others, but still be respectful. And the journey towards writing this book was from my son, who is now 9, when he entered school in Newton, Mass. He was the only Cambodian-American. And he asked me what it meant to be Cambodian-American. And when I was doing research, I couldn't find a single book that properly helped me help him. So I went on a journey to ensure that not only would I educate my own family and to preserve our culture, but to educate the communities that we're a part of.
So I think your question was, what did we say no to? You mean, okay, I said no to sleep. It was fine for a while. But I'm reminded, Rebecca, as well, what you said about we all need to have a team that helps us get there. And mine was, I'm a single parent, but my parents flew into town sometimes so that I could go to a writing colony, so that I could sit there and research this book. I also feel like I felt like I was writing the book for somebody else other than me. And even though the writing, I try to write regularly, almost every day, even a little bit, because it's good for my mental health. There's something about it that resets me, like maybe a run or a swim would. And so there was that piece of it, of doing it for me in that way, for my sanity. But there was this other piece when I started to do the research, and I traveled out to the Imperial Valley, and I met these farming families that had farmed for 3, 4, 5 generations, whose parents were, and they were elderly at the point that I came out to meet with them. Their Mexican mothers had passed on, their Punjabi fathers had passed on, but they were on the same farms. And they were so welcoming. I stayed with them, several nights in a row. They invited me to, their parties. And they were so, I think, touched that somebody wanted to tell about their unique history, that they involved me in family jokes, and they told me stuff that I felt like I couldn't put in the book. So I felt in the end that I was speaking for them at that time. And that was a very special part of the writing of the book, and helped me not let go of it through working, raising children. I was like, I can't let go of the book. And it was something that, it kind of gripped. I think people who are really involved in their writing, they feel like an idea grips them and they can't let it go. And it sort of tortures them. Like, you want to let it go because you just want to watch TV with your kid. Even if it's like Frozen or something. I would have rather have done that, but no, I had to write the damn book. So
I love that you said even if it's Frozen. I would love to watch Frozen, like just for fun. Both of them, yes. I heard there's a third. I cannot find the time. But this leads me to my next question, which is, who did you have in mind as your primary reader when you were writing the book, and then has that changed as the book has met the world?
I somehow thought that the entire world would be enamored with this story and couldn't wait to read it. Boy, was I wrong. So I thought there would be a group of South Asian folks of descent who would be very interested in the book, and there are some. I thought there would be a lot of lawyerly progressive types that would be interested in the book. But as things have progressed, the book came out in 2020. It came out in week 6 of our COVID lockdown because we like to do things in just that way. After you write the book for 13 years, you like for it to come out in the middle of a pandemic. And, I found actually that people related to, for sure, the political messages that were in there, but there was also another group of people that were really involved in the family saga and what it meant to leave behind somebody that you loved and what it meant to create a new life. There's a lot of people who were farmers that just loved the book. And I don't know if there was another question about this, but when I went back out to my book travels got canceled. But 3 years to the day, through some weird coincidence, I happened to be in the Imperial Valley reading at the museum where I did a lot of the research, and they had organized this thing for me, and they had to. People cared about that book, and in that spot, it was their own history, and we had to pull in other chairs and line the outside of the hall. And one person came up to me at the end of the reading and said, Rishi, I read your book 3 years ago when it came out, and I was, he was, I think, like a data entry person. He was working in some IT field, and he said, after I finished your book, I just realized I needed to study history, and I now teach history at the high school. And I was like, wow. Okay, I wrote the book for you. So that's my favorite story.
So when my book came out, I thought it was perfect timing. There was hope for the future. Diversity, equity, inclusion was very big and pretty much on everyone's radar, and it was an acceptable thing, and then it wasn't. And so what I'm learning, though, it's how do you navigate these very difficult environments? Because you do go out into this world hoping that people are going to respond to your book. People are going to be interested in your book. And you've taken all of this time and many, many years, mine 10, but it's this idea that there's going to be this reciprocated process, that people are going to line up and wait for you and hear your story. And then when none of those things occur, you kind of, you take a step back, and not that I'm without support, but what I want to say is that I am navigating a different terrain. I am overcoming challenges that are different than I had anticipated. And it has made me so much more, I didn't know I had this in me, but a weird strength to go to places that were not maybe originally interested in my story and knocking on, kind of, and it sounds silly, but it's like going to people, asking for me to do a reading, people that I wouldn't necessarily think were my audience. And so I would say that, initially I had an audience in mind, but ultimately you learn how to evolve and navigate in a different, I think, way than you can, at least in my situation. And I think I have had more support than I have ever imagined, and from so many different pockets of the world. And this book is sold internationally. And it is a #1 bestseller at a local bookstore in Lowell, Massachusetts, by the way, which has the second biggest North American population, and has been #1 on Amazon, and has been highlighted across the country. And I had no idea that anyone would be interested in a Cambodian-American story.
Congratulations. Yeah, to all of you. It's amazing. So I wrote this book, so about 5 years before I wrote this book, there were 2 books that came out and that were focused on the philanthropic sector, and they were both critiques, like really pointed critiques, kind of saying that, you know, this is a sector that purports to do good things, but it's kind of rotten to the core. And those books got a lot of attention in the philanthropic sector. I mostly agree with kind of the substance of their arguments. But what I saw was that they had this effect in the philanthropic sector of making people feel like, well, there's nothing we can do then. Sort of like people got really frozen and the resources got kind of frozen. And I saw that in particular with a new generation of younger, more diverse people who were finally coming into the sector, coming from nonprofits, coming from community. And so I partly wrote the book for them to try to answer the question of those of us who are practitioners, who actually are in these roles where we can be moving money, what is it that we can do that's different, that doesn't just replicate what hasn't worked before? So I wrote it for the practitioners. I wrote it for the decision makers, the CEOs and the trustees. I especially wrote it for the trustees, and one of the things that's been really remarkable has been hearing about all these foundations, not just in the US, but I just got back from 10 days in the UK, and I met people from Brazil, I met people from Denmark, I met people from Mexico, like foundation boards that are reading the book together and that are doing things differently as a result, which was amazing. And then what has surprised me is I did write it for nonprofits, almost kind of as a secondary audience, to partly say, like, you can ask for more. And so it's been great to see it picked up there in this moment where nonprofits are in crisis because resources are not flowing. And then lastly, you know, we are on the cusp of a generational wealth transfer. $124 trillion are going to transfer over the next 24 years, next 20 years. And it's anticipated that 12 trillion of that are going to transfer into the charitable sector. I think that we take that for granted. And so I wrote this book in part to give people who are going to be inheriting these resources a blueprint and a roadmap for how they can be something that actually is relevant today, that's not just the Andrew Carnegie model of philanthropy. So it's made me really happy when people gift my book to 25-year-olds, or when I hear about, yesterday I had a professor from Boston University come up to me and say that he was going to teach my book. And I was like, he teaches philanthropy, I guess.
These ladies are so inspirational. I wrote this book for leaders. I wanted them to have lots of resources accessible to them at the ready. I think the thing that has surprised me about writing a book is this is its own thing. It's sort of like when you have children and you think you have control over them and you realize you don't. It spreads like seeds. And so you sometimes get information back and sometimes you don't, and it surprises you. So one of the things that has really surprised me there's so much in here that it's interesting for me to see what really has landed for people. And what has surprised me is there's a part of the book where I talk about forgiveness. There's a lot of myself in this book and my story and my clients' stories. And there's a whole exercise I walk through and like, how do you forgive really painful stuff that people have done to you? Because we all carry some version of that. And I walked through the experience I had with my father and walking through this process for myself so that I could say goodbye to him as he was dying in a way that felt really aligned with who I want to be in the world. And that process has touched people in a way that was really unexpected to me. That was a part of the book that I felt like was important, but it's not the thing that I thought would resonate the most. And so I think about my book now. This is a little weird, but I talk to my book sometimes, and I'll say, because I think of myself outside my book. So I'll say, like, what do you need from me today so that you get in the hands of people who need you? And there's a way to relate to it that removes our ego from it, but it's really about the work itself. And there's so much power in that. And I am surprised as I say that, especially to some of my clients who are working on manuscripts and other things. Initially, they look at me sideways, and then they're like, actually, I think I might try that and see what happens. And so they're just all these unexpected pieces of the writing journey, I think, that expose a lot about who we are and transform us in the process, which I think is one of the most delightful parts about it as well.
Thank you so much. So the conference theme is Elevate Your Voice. And I'm sure many people in this room have a story that they haven't yet claimed as worthy of a book. What would you say to the person who is still on the fence about putting their story on the page, or just by listening to you today, just realize that they do have a story that they want to put on the page?
First, I would say you don't have to start with a book. It can be an essay. I had a couple essays published before I ever wrote this. It can be a daily writing practice for yourself. There's so much creative energy wrapped up in writing. And as lawyers, we've been trained to write in a very particular way. And I found it really freeing to write in a very different style and way, as a way to understand myself, understand the world, and then to contribute back. So I would say start very small. And when some people talk about write morning pages from Artist Way, thank you. And it can be 2 minutes. Start really, really, really small. Be gentle with yourself. And that success builds. The other thing I would say is I feel like we are transmitters of stories that we're not, as I said before, we're not always sure where it's going to land. And so it's been interesting, even in the essays I've written, to hear the impact it's had on other people. And so sometimes we get wrapped up in our own imposter syndrome, perfectionism, procrastination, all of that stuff. But when we think about the transformative effect of stories for other people, when they see themselves in what we have shared and what gets unlocked for them, it can help us step outside some of those barriers that we often confront.
So I would echo those, and I would maybe just land on saying, like, don't ever underestimate how much stories create containers for new realities. So if you have that impulse in you where you're like, I think there's something I want to write, we are actually in a moment where we need to build new worlds, and writing is a tool for that. And it can be as small as an essay, an opinion piece. I think 10 years ago, I went to something called the Op-Ed Project. And if you ever have a chance to do this, I would recommend it. It was a project that was started to try to change the fact that 82% of the opinion pieces that are published in the major newspapers in this country are written by men, and most of those are white men. And so they set out to try to change that. And I went to that, and then I think it was 5 years later that I wrote my first opinion piece. So, like, these things take time, but when I wrote my first opinion piece, it was the week that Trump was inaugurated in 2017. it made a difference in my sector. People read it. And I heard back that, oh, we're doing this, we're thinking about this differently now. So just know that it makes a difference, and we really need just a different set of stories and a different set of people who are shaping how we understand our reality.
So I mentioned earlier that both of my parents have very limited education. My mother's actually illiterate, so she's unable to read my own children's book. And I say this with a lot of humility because I owe my life to them, and they were the one who actually, I think, helped me get to this point in my own career, but maybe not even knowingly, because they're unable to actually read my story and some of the works that I've been doing as of late. But I say this to say that you are capable, you are able. I was able to do it, and I think everyone in this room is quite capable. And I think it takes that first step, the initial first step. Writers and readers were not necessarily a part of my upbringing. But what my parents did was allow me to go to the library every summer. And I would just browse the library, and I found myself dreaming a lot, imagining a life outside of our own space. And I dreamt of a bigger world. And so part of it is starting to dream, and then starting to act, and then starting to put it down in a way that makes sense to you. And I think everyone, most people said it doesn't have to be a book per se, but it can be something that you have, that is important to you, that's storytelling in some sense. And eventually it can progress into other forms. It could be film, it could be music, it could be a book. But I think the initial step is to put it down and to know that you are capable, and you stick with it, and it will happen.
I think this was just so wonderfully said between the three of you. The only thing I would add to that is just that if you write about something that's deeply important to you, it becomes, it runs on its own fuel, and it will propel itself forward and also be a relief to you, because we're all at any stage of our life working out psychological struggles or issues, or places that we are in our own development. And if you're able to articulate some of your struggle through that, it's a great gift to be able to write about it. It helps you figure out what that is, and it also pulls in, relates to people everywhere around the world, regardless of your own individual background or the specific details that you're coming to the experience with. I think really good writing does that. It unites the experience, and it shows people that at core we have these, like, anthropologically speaking, these things that are particular to our species. And good writing actually reveals that in a way that I think other things don't.
Thank you. So I want to open this up to the audience in case you have any questions. Okay. Well, I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to go there. Also because this is my team.
So this is such an exciting panel. I'm so glad that it was. But one topic that has not come up that I'm interested in is, do you have agents? What was the publishing process like to find a publisher? Because I have a lot of friends who are thinking about writing, and they're all very intimidated by, even if I write a great book, who's going to publish it? How am I going to get it out there? So I'm just curious.
Does anyone want to take that?
So, I started doing this back in 2005. Like that, I actually got a master's in creative writing from BU while I was working part-time at EPA.
Sleeping.
And not sleeping. That was the only thing I had to say no to. It was very easy. And it was a very traditional path in those days. I sent out a manuscript to an agent, like 5 at a time, waited forever, and finally heard back from one. She's still my agent today. I think today is pretty different. There's a lot of other avenues by which people can be published. And self-publishing, which has been scoffed at for decades, is no longer scoffed at. People sometimes even make the jump from self-publishing to a traditional publishing house. And even very well-established and extremely talented, accomplished writers are increasingly being abandoned by the top 5 publishing houses and find themselves being propelled towards the smaller publishing houses that are really on the forefront of the publishing world right now and putting forth the most exciting work. So I would say to your folks, they could do it all simultaneously, because everyone will tell you you're not allowed to do it simultaneously. Like, the agent says, please don't, send out to others when forget that. Like, whatever rule they tell you, just break it. You gotta because you've only got a certain number of years, to be doing this. So just be aggressive and the biggest thing to do there is you've got to protect the optimism and the dream. So even though you're getting these discouraging notes back, that's fine. You have your list of things you're going to send out to, get your discouraging note back, cross out that thing on your list, send out to the next person, and then sit down and cry about it. But first send it out again. That's the whole.
Yeah.
So this writing retreat I went to that was about how to know if you have a book in you. There was a publisher who came from North Atlantic Books to talk about the publishing industry. And he made an offer to me. He was one of the people that said, this is a book, you should write it. And he made the offer that when you are shopping out your book proposal, I'm happy to give you feedback on it. And so I talked to an agent, and the agent said, there's about 4 different publishing houses that your book is a good fit for, and you probably don't need an agent unless you think that you want to kind of be an ongoing, full-time author, which I don't. That's not my path. And so I guess what I want to share is you can go directly to smaller publishers. And when I sent this to the publisher that I had met at that retreat for feedback, he immediately turned around and said, we want to publish this book and we're going to make you a competitive offer. And what was really great about working with them is they are a nonprofit press that has a mission. And so their mission in that, overlapped with my book was about putting out works that help us actually navigate the big social change, social justice issues that we are facing today. And they distribute through Penguin Random House. And so that partnership has actually been everything, because the part of why people have been able to find my book everywhere is because Penguin Random House gets my book everywhere. And it's not a mainstream book, but it was in Barnes & Noble, and when I went to Australia, people were able to quickly, Penguin Random House got my books to Australia in a week. And I got the pleasure of working with people who cared about the content and the mission, but also cared about its commercial viability.
How do you feel from a creative perspective in this new age of AI that we think that the world of artificial intelligence is taking away our desire to tell the story because so many people are just falling into that trap, and just the long-lasting effect if these stories aren't told because people are being disincentivized because we now have this robot that's kind of creating content as opposed to telling true stories that can't really be replicated?
So one of my favorite chapters in my book, and the one where I took the biggest risk, is a chapter that I write as a podcast transcript, think Ezra Klein show, where I have Andrew Carnegie on my podcast, and we talk about the gospel of wealth and everything that's changed over the last 140 years, and I tell him about what we're doing differently. it's very fun. It's very tongue-in-cheek, and it reaches people because of the humor, right? And I recently, on the 1-year anniversary of the book, I was speaking to a very stuffy room of big foundation people. And right before going up on stage, I made literally 15 minutes before going up there, I made the call to actually do a live reading from that. I asked a friend of mine to come and be Carnegie, and we went up there and we did it, and the crowd loved it, and it was great. And then at the book signing, this guy came up to me and he said, "So did you use AI to write that? Like, did you just tell the AI to be Andrew Carnegie?" And I found that gutting because, what I said to him was, I spent 6 months on that, and the reason that chapter works the way it does is because I dreamt about what would I say to Andrew Carnegie if he were sitting across from me. There's so much wisdom and hard work and thinking that went into that it just, I don't know what it made. I wrote the book in 2024 before everybody used AI, and it left me actually feeling so sad for all the writers who maybe won't get the creative satisfaction and the intellectual ahas because they have the chatbot do it for them. But also it just killed me that he thought that. So
You've hit my soapbox. And I'm going to get a little woo. So I think that there is a difference in how knowledge and stories get transmitted when they are generated by humans because of the energy that is conveyed through the words. That, I think we're going to take a little while to catch on to what that actually means. But when we think about reading, so if you read something that AI wrote and you read what your friend has written about some similar thing, there is a somatic effect of words that come from the depths of us that AI can't replicate. The other piece I will say is that it requires a lot of self-control in this age for us to not use a tool of efficiency that sucks our soul dry. And eventually, our cognitive capacities will diminish. It's like if you've ever used a map, your smartphone, to get somewhere instead of thinking through the directions, you will lose those directions in your head if you continue to rely on that, right? And there's research, if your phone's out, you don't remember things as well, all of that. AI is taking that exponentially. And so every moment we choose instead to grapple with what we want to say and where it comes from is a countercultural moment against what's happening. And I'm not even getting into the environmental impacts and the labor impacts. And so I guess the last thing I will say on this is we need to be thoughtful about how we are selling ourselves short related to AI. I turned down a coaching gig because I knew they were going to be using video coaching sessions to build a bot. And there's so much of that happening in the world right now where people are getting paid to use their intellectual property and hard-won expertise to build the bots. Just be thoughtful about the impact for yourself and other people in your field about that. Sorry. You asked for it.
No, I agree. I love it.
No, I just want to, Also, I want to just underline what you just said, Rebecca. It's only in writing that we walk that thin line between conscious and subconscious. And when you read something that's written at that level of depth, that reads very differently from the AI piece, and also in line with what you just said about to not participate in the project. This book, not my first one, but this book was actually stolen by Anthropic and was part of the class action piece that was settled. I mean, it's nothing singular in itself. There were thousands of books. Almost every single one of my writer friends has had one, if not 5 books stolen in the same way. And you had to do all of the stuff, like opt out of the class action group or, in order to bring it yourself. And I missed the date. So for all of 13 years of work, I get $1,500 for this baby from them for having stolen the text of this book. And you can imagine, what it is for people like Stephen King and those. I do know some people who were courageous enough to, and on the ball enough that they didn't miss the deadline like I did, to actually sign themselves out of the class and are, going forward with their own suits. I wonder what's going to happen to them. It will take many years, I'm sure, but the principle of it is refreshing, right? I wish I was doing that because, $1,500 doesn't even get you a dishwasher, right? I just want to say that, and the piece that's very difficult about it is we think of Anthropic as the good guys because they didn't fall in with the Trump administration around the latest thing with the military, but they did this, right? Everything is compromised. Everything is, there are no good guys. And it's wherever you can resist.
I think the last point I make is I don't think AI will ever replace authenticity. The stories that you're sharing, I think, comes from a place that no robot could ever replicate. And yes, you are feeding it language. You are feeding it the things that it wants to know, what it wants to hear. But at the end of the day, what are you sharing that is important and meaningful to you that you want to share? You're not going to, and I think this is the other thing. The audience can't be everyone. So who are you really trying to share that story with? And if you're really trying to reach that population, I think you can reach them. It just may not be the entire world. So I think, understanding your audience, who you're trying to reach, and writing. Why you're writing. Exactly. Why you're writing. And so I think that's one of the most important things around understanding AI. AI is trying to reach everyone. And I think the written work itself, you have your audience. You know who you want to write for. You know who wants to listen to you. And so find that.
I think we have time for one more question. I think there was one. There are several. So I'm going to let you pick.
Sorry. Hi, can you give us all a non-Amazon platform where we can buy all of your books? Which, of course, you should have led with. Come on now. And Chanda, what age is your book intended for so that we can buy it for all the kids in our lives?
Thank you. It's 4 to 8, but I say all ages because children don't buy their own books. And I'm hopeful that more families will become more involved in. And just kind of FYI, there are more books about animals and other things than there are about diverse characters. So I thank you so much for your support. And so I say all ages, but 4 to 8 buy it again? You can buy it at all independent bookstores, including Barnes and Nobles, not independent, but there are major outlets, Target, Walmart, and pretty much anywhere you look.
But walk to your independent bookstore.
Exactly.
Buy a book there and pick up 2 others while you're there because you just thought they looked interesting.
There's a site called bookshop.org.
Yes.
And they can, and not only can you get the book from them, but when you do, they also give money to an independent bookstore.
Yes. Great. Yes. Bookshop is great. Buying books is great. I mean, you'd be shocked at how hard it is to actually rack up. I mean, unless you're a best-selling author, it really takes time and it takes people being willing to buy your book. Thank you.
Rebecca, did you want to add?
I would say bookshop.org.
Yes. Bookshop can also order the book if it's not in the store, and so you can just let them know that that's what you want and they will order it for you. Okay, so can I squeeze in one more or should I? Okay, so I asked so that I'm not the one disappointing you. But I would like to close with just a lightning round, literally, because Miel is right there. So I'm going to go down the line and ask you to say right now, what is giving you perspective, comfort, inspiration, or illumination? And let's do that in like 1 minute each.
Okay. After a long time of not writing, I'm writing a story about the 1965 Immigration Act and my family coming in, and the fact that I still have the green card that I got when I crossed the border inside LAX airport, the border. And it's amazing to me how much I love writing the story of my family in that moment whenever I see all the ICE stuff going on.
I'm actually doing a lot of research around Cambodians in World War I and the colonization of France, of Cambodia during that time, and the Cambodian men who served in World War I in France. And so I'm trying to share a new narrative around what we see as war heroes, war stories, and war narratives, and who were involved. And so I'm hopeful that this will give new perspective.
A gift of this book to me was it gave me a creative practice. It made me realize that I want to keep that going forward. So I'm still writing, and I'm also thinking about other ways to bring creativity into my social change work.
I am very fortunate to be inspired every day by the work that my clients are doing, and so it is a massive privilege and inspires me every day. So I lean into that more and more.
So I just want to, I think we should all give them a round of applause.